Zheng Yi Sao was a woman who couldn't be held down by the rules. Not only was she a female pirate who broke the mold, but she was probably the most successful pirate in history. And she would bring South China to its knees under her pirates' raids. She was born Shi Yang, born sometime between 1775 and 1785 to unknown parents. Whoever her family were, they were poor, although they were possibly also tankers, boat people who traditionally lived on junks along the Chinese coast rather than on the mainland. Whatever her true origins, by 1800 it's most likely she was working either as a prostitute or as the madam of a floating brothel in Guangdong. Most women in China at the time had no access to a position of power, but Zheng Yi Sao attempted to carve out a place for herself by apparently learning secrets from those she shared a bed with. But she was about to increase her hold on power in a big way, far above gossip between a few local businessmen. In 1801, Zheng Yi Sao was about to meet the man who would become her first husband, Zheng Yi. Not much is known about how they met, but it's possible he was part of a crew who attacked Guangdong, as he was in fact a pirate. Zheng Yi came from a family of pirates who had held claim to the Chinese seas since the 14th century, and at the time, he was a privateer for the Vietnamese Taiyi dynasty. Whether he was taken with Zheng Yi Sao for her beauty, personality, or if they simply saw in each other a useful ally, the pair were married within the year, and Shi Yang took on her married name of Zheng Yi Sao, or Zheng Yi's wife. Although there are few sources backing it up, it was suggested that Zheng Yi Sao only agreed to the marriage on the understanding that their finances would be split evenly down the middle. It would certainly fit with their later relationship. A year after they were married, in February 1802, a member of Zheng Yi's family was killed. His cousin, Zheng Yi, was captured and executed by the emperor's forces in the town of Jiangping, near the border between Vietnam and China. This left Zheng Yi's fleet free to be taken over by Zheng Yi, sailing back to China with a large force of Vietnamese men. He was now in charge of one of the largest fleets of pirate ships along the Chinese coast. Unfortunately, this happened to occur at the same time as a period of fighting for control broke out between those who had been pirates within Vietnamese waters, who were now vying between themselves for power. It was a year after this that Zheng Yi Sao would also give birth to her first child, a boy named Cheng Ying-shi, who was born in 1803. Zheng Yi Sao and Zheng Yi took their opportunity. They took charge of these loose groups. Zheng Yi as the patriarch, Zheng Yi Sao as the organizer and consolidator. In July 1805, these groups signed an agreement to form a confederation, each giving up some of their autonomy to allow the entire group to gain from helping one another. The confederation was made up of 6 fleets: black, blue, white, yellow, purple, and red, the largest fleet, which was commanded by Zheng Yi himself. Zheng Yi Sao was no passive wife, and she aided her husband by helping run operations from the mainland while he was away at sea. In 1807, she would also give birth to their second son, Cheng Shengshi. But a few months later, on the 16th of November in the same year, Zheng Yi's life would come to a sudden and unexpected end when he fell overboard in a storm to his death. Zheng Yi Sao was now a widow, and in her position, most women had to retreat from public life until they were once again married to a suitable second husband. But she wasn't most women. Still at a young age, Zheng Yi Sao, as a young mother of 2 children and living in a period of time that would not have allowed her to take charge on the mainland, took over her dead husband's piracy operation. She did this partly with the help of Cheng Yi's nephew, Cheng Paoyang, the son of Cheng Shi, Cheng Anbang, as well as being familiar with Guo Podai, the leader of the Black Fleet, who had actually been press-ganged into piracy by Cheng Yi when younger. But her biggest supporter was Cheng Yi's adopted son, Chang Pao, who was now commanding the Red Fleet as well as being highly skilled at sea. And before anyone starts worrying about pirates having a soft spot for adopting orphans, Chang Pao was also press-ganged into piracy by his adoptive father when he was about 15 years old. These connections allowed Zheng Yi Sao to take over control of the Confederation. A few years later in 1810, a government official named Wen Chengxi would remark, Chang Pao obeyed Zheng Yi Sao's orders and consulted her on all things before acting. But this was hardly surprising, considering Zheng Yi Sao had entered into an affair with Chang Pao after his adoptive father's death, which quickly became a full relationship, and it's speculated by some sources that they were in fact already romantic before Cheng Yi's death. Now, the pair would increase the power of the Chinese pirates within the Confederation. In September 1808, the Red Fleet ambushed Lin Guolian, the brigade general of Humen, destroying his fleet of 35 ships near Mazhao Island. Just a month later, Chang Pao fought and defeated Lieutenant Colonel Lin Fa near the present-day Weian Island east of Humen. These two events reduced the size of Guangdong's provincial fleet by around half, and this allowed the pirates to enter the rivers of southern China. The Confederation was also held together by a strict code, but there is doubt over whether it was Chang Pao or Zheng Yi Sao who implemented them. Considering she seems to have called the shots for most things, it's likely it was Zheng Yi Sao though. The punishments for breaking the code were severe. Anyone who disobeyed the order of a superior or decided to go off on his own was immediately decapitated. Stealing from the Confederation's treasury or from villagers who gave them supplies was also severely dealt with, and desertion would end with the offending party having their ears cut off. One rule which was almost certainly Zheng Yi Sao's was one which protected women. Any pirate found raping a female captive was immediately executed, and if they chose to take a woman as their wife, they had to remain faithful to her. Zheng Yi Sao also held her confederation together through business transactions. All raids had to be approved by her and her alone, and the goods taken were logged by the purser and split evenly when needed. With the military might of the Red Fleet behind her, no one dared question her word on this. Using these finances, Zheng Yi Sao was also able to solidify the pirates' position by bribing the very officials who were supposedly hunting them down. As a result of the code, her control over the finances, and her deals on land, Zheng Yi Sao was able to command a terrifying and heavily disciplined fighting force, despite being a woman. In the following year of 1809, Zheng Yi Sao was called on by other pirates to aid them against the provincial forces. Before a battle broke out between them near Dawanshan Island, Zheng Yi Sao took control of both the Red and White fleets, ordering Chang Pao to approach from the front with 10 ships, while his lieutenants swept in at the sides and the leader of the White fleet captured them from the rear. But it was Zheng Yi Sao herself who swept in with the bulk of the Red and White fleets and charged, routing and ultimately defeating the provincial commander Sun Changmao. Despite some losses from the Chinese naval forces, by August, Zheng Yi Sao was still giving commands as the pirates' leader. Chang Pao would lead the Red Fleet around central Guangdong. Guo Podai, the leader of the Black Fleet, would go around Shunde in Guangdong province, and Zheng Yi Sao would take her personal fleet of ships to the waters near Xinhuanxi in Guangdong. Between the three fleets, numerous towns and villages fell to the bloody swathe of violence the pirates dealt across the waterways of the Pearl River. At least 12,000 people officially died in the raids, but the real number was likely much higher. Over September and October, the raids continued further upriver, with hundreds more people taken prisoner. By late autumn, the provincial naval forces had regained their strength. But on the 12th of October, Chang Pao had once again defeated them near Shaoan. Zheng Yi Sao and her fleets were unparalleled rulers of the Chinese waters. But it wasn't all one-sided. Desperate to regain control over the riverways, Chinese officials began to look outside their country for aid. At the time, the Portuguese Empire controlled Macau on the south coast of China, and they had also felt the sting of the pirates with attacks on their ships. In early November, they aided the Chinese government by taking revenge. Zheng Yi Sao suddenly took a few of her ships to Dongyong Bay, north of Daoshan Island, in order to carry out repairs. The Portuguese took their chance, sending 3 ships and a brig on the 4th of November to harass her, to which she immediately sent word to Chang Pao to send the Red Fleet to her aid. It was enough to send the Portuguese out of harm's way, and by the time he arrived on the 5th, Zheng Yi Sao no longer needed the help, as the Portuguese had withdrawn their ships. But on the 8th of November, the Portuguese returned, and this time they brought the big guns with them. Several brigs and a frigate blockaded Zheng Yi Sao and Chang Pao, and by the 20th, they had been joined by 93 ships from the Chinese naval forces, commanded by Sun Chan Mao. The pirates attempted to counterattack and push back as they always had, but this time the weather was against them and the wind prevented them from gaining the upper hand. The furthest the pirates got was capturing 1 ship and killing the 74 crew members, and equally, the Portuguese were unable to break through. A stalemate set in. On the 28th of November, Sun Chan Mao decided he was sick of waiting it out, and more than 40 of the Chinese ships were set alight and sent towards the pirate vessels. And you might think that would do the trick, except that Zheng Yi Sao and her fleet managed to divert the fire ships, bringing them ashore, dousing the flames, and then using them for firewood. Ironically, 2 of the ships that were still on fire blew back into Sun's naval forces and set some of them alight instead. On the 29th, Zheng Yi Sao and Chang Pao decided to make a break for it as the weather improved, and they broke through the blockade, escaping into the South China Sea. The provincial forces had lost 3 ships and 74 men, whereas the pirates had lost no ships and only 40 men. It was hard to decide who might have won what would become known as the Battle of Tiger Mouth. But this situation couldn't remain forever, and in 1810 Zheng Yi Sao's piratical forces suddenly surrendered. The reasons why they surrendered aren't crystal clear, but it's most likely the pirates realised their power was so great they probably wouldn't face any punishment if they turned themselves in. They were right, and the Guangdong officials were so relieved for their battle against Zheng Yi Sao's pirates to be over that they agreed to allow them to retire with no fuss. Alternatively, it's also very possible the Confederation was starting to break down. Cracks were showing in the weeks before, when Guo Podai refused to send his Black Fleet in to help with the blockade. And in January, he had already surrendered separately to the Viceroy of Liangguang, Pai Ling, being rewarded with the rank of sub-lieutenant. In the previous months during the blockade, the Chinese ships had been joined by both Portuguese and British ships that helped cut off supplies to Zheng Yi Sao's pirates, which can't have helped. On the 21st of February 1810, Zheng Yi Sao and Chang Pao met on board his ship with Macau's ouvidor, or magistrate, Miguel José de Arriaga, and Pai Ling, ready to negotiate. However, the negotiations stalled when Pai Ling, understandably, refused to allow the couple to keep 5,000 of their men and 80 junks in order to trade in salt and, funnily enough, help the anti-pirate campaign in Guangdong. Chang Pao was spooked when 10 British trading ships sailed close by, and he and Zheng Yi Sao retreated, fearing a trap. However, by April the 8th, Zheng Yi Sao had had enough, and she led a group of pirate wives and children with her, unaccompanied and unarmed, to the Governor-General's Yamen in Canton. Although he insisted his willingness to pardon Zheng Yi Sao and Chang Pao, she was still a tough negotiator and stated that she wished for her husband to retain 120 of his ships. Zheng Yi Sao was well aware time was on her side, and she threatened to return to a life of piracy if her demands were not met. She refused all other proposals until Pai Ling agreed fully to her demands. On the 20th of April in Furongsha, near what is now Guzaiwan, Zheng Yi Sao and Chang Pao surrendered officially to Chinese officials, giving up 17,318 pirates, 226 ships, 1,315 cannons, and 2,798 assorted weapons. 24 of these ships and 1,433 pirates were also under Zheng Yi Sao's personal command. Not only were they pardoned, but Zheng Yi Sao and Chang Pao were given official permission to marry, and Chang Pao was made a lieutenant with a private fleet of around 30 vessels under his command. He would further distinguish himself by soon after defeating the Blue Fleet he had once sailed with as a pirate. The couple, now settling down to normal life, moved to Minnan, Fujian, and the emperor promoted Chang Pao to the position of lieutenant colonel in the Minnan regiment. Not long after, he was sent to the Pescadores Island and promoted yet again to colonel, head of the Penghu regiment, and in command of 2 battalions. He obviously had great skill at sea, but several officials complained that those who were pardoned criminals should probably have their promotions capped. Zheng Yi Sao herself, as the wife of an important and rapidly rising official, wasted no time in ensuring she also reaped the benefits. In 1813, she gave birth to another son, Chang Yulin, and in 1821 she petitioned the government for the relevant title for herself due to her husband's position and rank, despite the fact remarried widows were not usually allowed this. Not that Zheng Yi Sao seems like the sort of woman to allow that to stop her. In 1822, however, Chang Pao died at the age of just 36, and Zheng Yi Sao returned to Guangdong with her 11-year-old son. However, you can take the woman out of piracy, but you can't take the piracy out of the woman. And so in 1814, Zheng Yi Sao filed charges against Wu Yannan, an official, for having apparently embezzled 28,000 taels of silver that Chang Pao had handed over to him in 1810 for the purchase of an estate. The viceroy of Liangguang at the time, Lin Zexi, was obviously confused as to why the family, if they truly believed the charges, had allowed Wu Yaonan to keep the proceeds for so many years. Recognizing it for the shakedown it was, he petitioned the emperor to drop the case, which happened a few weeks later. Zheng Yi Sao was now also running an infamous gambling house in Guangdong, so she wasn't short of money. She would die just a few years later in 1844 at the age of around 69, certainly having lived a full life, but with a remarkably happy ending for a successful pirate. Zheng Yi Sao was significant in Chinese history not only for being a female pirate who wielded power, but also for turning the institution of marriage for upward mobility for women on its head. Instead of propelling herself socially, Zheng Yi Sao seems to have been the driving force for helping her husbands instead. It was her organizational skills and leadership that helped her first husband, Zheng Yi, to become head of a confederation of refugee pirates. And her hold over the fleets allowed her second husband, Chang Pao, to rise through the ranks and assume control of the biggest of these, the Red Fleet, and later to go from wanted criminal to high-ranking official. Any male pirate who had been under her command could drop Zheng Yi Sao's name after she surrendered and find himself in a decent official position. Despite holding power, abandoning marriage norms, being anything but submissive and docile, and in later life not caring what anyone thought of her business activities, she also seems to have commanded the genuine respect and acknowledgement of those she led. Her charisma and character was such that when Zheng Yi Sao was a pirate, she terrorized South China, and when she retired, no one could possibly have stepped into her shadow and taken her place. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss any new documentaries.